Welcome back. In this video, I would like to get to the point where I can enter a name and then click start in order to get to the next screen, where then we want to eventually display the questions with the options that we can select from. Okay, so in order to get there, we need to create another activity. Okay, so we have this main activity inside of our package here, but now let's go ahead and create a new activity to which we can then change. And I'm going to select empty activity here. And the name of this second activity will be quiz questions activity. So here you can just enter quiz questions activity, because this is going to be the second screen of our application, and that's where we're going to move over. So generate a layout file. This is set by default, and I really want this to be activated as well. It's not going to be the launcher activity, which means it's not going to be the activity to which the user gets, so not the screen to which the user gets once he starts the application. So let's click finish, and now we will have this additional activity. You see, so this is the quiz questions activity, which has pretty much the same style, or looks pretty much the same as our main activity. The only difference is the name here and the layout file that is loaded. So now the associated layout file is this activity quiz question XML file, which currently is empty, and it will stay empty for this video, but in the next video we're going to fill it up. So the goal for now is to make sure that we have the questions ready. And that's what we're going to prepare in this video. We're going to see how to prepare all of the beautiful questions and even move over to this screen. So in order to move over to the screen, I'm going to get started by allowing to click on the button. And the button that I want to be able to click on is going to be our button in the activity main. So here you can go to this linear layout. We have this one button here, right? So it's this button that says start. So this button will need an ID so that we can access it. Okay, I'm going to give it an ID, and I'm gonna call it button start, like so, button underscore start, or you can call it button capital S start, however you want. Okay, so now this button start ID is what I will need to use in my main activity. So let's set up this button val, and I'm going to call it button start, which will be of type button, and we need to find the view by its ID. So r.id. And it was called button start. So now we can use this button to implement the onClick listener method as we have seen before. So for now, what I want to do in here, I want to check if the text that the user entered in here is not empty, because if it is empty, I don't want to be able to move over to the next screen. If it is not empty, so if there is a name, then I want to be able to move over to the next screen, which will start the quiz. So here, let's check if the name was entered, and therefore we need to get the data from this app-compat edit text. And I'm going to call this one et name. So here the ID will be et underscore name. Et stands for edit text. Okay, so here edit text. And now I can access this edit text in my main activity, and of course accordingly I will need to create a name property here, and this is going to be an edit text. So let's find the view by its ID, and this was rid.et underscore name, like so. So now I can access this name, and how do I want to access the name? Well, I just want to find out if it's not empty. So I want to check if the property that is inside of this et name, that's called text, is not empty. So we can check, is it not empty or is it empty? So we can do either way. We can just check is empty, because if it's empty, then I want to display a toast to the user. So here toast make text, and by the way, we need to import toast for that. Make text, and let's see here, make text, this one. And first we need to pass in the context, which will be the class itself. So this toast should be displayed in the main activity, and then I will tell the user to please enter your name. Okay, and then how long should it be displayed? So here toast.length long, and then finally show the whole thing. Okay, so let me put that in the second line so that it's going to be a little more readable. So we have this edit text now, and we check if it is empty, then we make a text. So we display a text. So let's see if this is going to work. And there we are. So John, let me enter E and click start. And you see nothing is displayed. Let me enter nothing and press start, and you can see that it says please enter your name. So once I enter something, it works. So, well, it doesn't do anything basically. So what I wanted to do instead is, however, to move to a different screen. And that is something that we have not done before, which is why I need to explain you how it's done. So basically, we create an intent, and this intent says from which activity we want to move to which other activity. So let's just set it up, and then it will make a lot more sense. So here we say val intent, which is of type intent, and we need to import this class intent. So once we do that, you can find it here. It says intent here, content intent. And if you're wondering why it's complaining about this button start, well, that's a really good question. That's because it's not happy with names that have an underscore. So this is called snake case, where we have underscores every now and then. And then there is the camel case, where you can rename it to, for example, button start, like so. And then it would be happy with the name. And same goes here, et name, like so, then it would be happy. So the IDE is happy. So in the XML, it doesn't care if you use it like this, but in variable names, it's not very happy if you use the camel case, the underscores. Okay, so now we have this intent. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, first of all, say from where I'm going. I'm going from this activity, so from the current context, from the main activity, over to my quiz questions activity. Now, this is a Java file, so I need to add class.java after 2 colons. That's just how it's done. And this is basically how I define where I'm moving. So this intent will now allow me to move from this activity to the quiz questions activity, which is this activity that we want to go to. And now this by itself will not be enough. We also need to make sure that we start this intent, because otherwise this intent will not do anything. So we start the activity, and here just with one y, like so, and we need to pass in the intent. Now this by itself would move us over to the other screen, but it would not close the current screen. So let's test that real quick. So welcome, and let's say I enter Dennis. Let me click start, and you see it moves me over to this next screen, which is currently an empty screen that doesn't have anything in it. And I can now still go back to the screen that I had before. Now, if you want to avoid that, you can just add finish here. So call the finish method, which will finish the current activity, which means it will close the main activity. So let's test it once again. Let's enter the name. My name is Dennis. I'm going to click start, and then I go back, and you see it closed the application. So now we are at a different version of the application. That's a little confusing because I had 2 instances of the application. So let's start. Click back, and you see we get out of the application entirely. So if you want that, you can just call finish here. Okay, next what we will need to create is going to be the data model of our questions. So inside of my namespace here, I'm going to create a new Kotlin class, and it will be a data class. So the data class that I'm going to create is going to be question. So not questions, but individual question. So here I can define what kind of parameters I want to have for this question. So what do I need to know about each question? So what kind of information do I need? And I need to have the question itself, I need to have the image, and I have to have the different options, as well as need to know which of the options is correct. So let's just set those up. And by the way, it's also good practice to have an ID so that we know which question we are at. So let's say we want to have the question. So now think about it. What would be the data type that we want to have for the question? Well, I want to have a string. So the question should just be a text, right? Then we need to have an image. And the thing how images in Android work is that you can create them based on ints. So the image will be an integer, which just means, well, a location on inside of our resources. Okay. And then we need to have the options. So option 1, as well as option 2, option 3, and so forth. So you can just add those here. This one will be 2, then we will have 3, and finally we will have 4, like so. And of course we need to know what the correct answer is. So here, correct answer is going to be of type int. So it will just be the number. So this one will, for example, be value 0, 1, 2, and 3. And the correct answer will just hold the index. So either 0 if it's answer 1 or option 1, and 1 if it's option 2, and so forth. That's just how it calculates, right? That's just how computers are counting, right? Starting from 0. Those weirdos. Okay, so now let's go over and set up how we can actually access these questions. So therefore, we will need to have another object, and this way, or this time, it will be this one here, just an object. I'm going to call this one constants. So in here, I'm going to store all of my different constants that I want to have. For example, the username, then the amount of questions, the correct answers, and so forth. But first of all, I need to have a function which gives me the questions. And I can then call this function from my questions activity and get the right question or the next question that I need to display. We know how a question looks like, right? It's this class here, this data class. And now I just need to call this function getQuestions, and it will return all of the questions. So I'm going to create an array list of questions. You could, of course, also get the questions from an XML file or a JSON file or another resource, and you're going to learn how to use JSON files later on. But we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to just hard code them into this constants file. Okay, so here inside of this file, we're going to create all of the questions that we want to have. So therefore, I need to create a questions list, and it will be an array list. So I'm just going to say it's an array list of questions. So of individual question items, which is why I don't say questions, but question here. Okay, so this question list now needs to be filled up. So how can we fill this question list? Well, by creating individual questions. So let me create one question, which will be of type question. Okay, I'm saying this word way too often, so don't make a drinking game out of it. And then I start by entering all of the details that a question needs to have. So hover over it and you see we need an ID, we need the question itself, and then we need the image. And by the way, I realized that I called this questions, and I'm not really happy about that. It should be question. So here, let's change that real quick before we ever use it. And now we can use it. So we need the ID, question, image, option 1, option 2, and so forth. Let's start with the ID. And for the first question, we can go as simple as give it an ID of 1. Okay, we don't start at 0 this time. Not this time. Then we can add the question, what country does this flag belong to? And then we have the question mark, and we separate the entries now. The next one will be the image, and the image is something you can get by using the following approach. You see this here, ICBG, will be internally treated like an integer, which is why it's fine to use it this way. Okay, so here you see the image has to be an int, and the cool thing is r.drawable. Whatever image is used will return an integer. Now, of course, I don't want to have or to use this background as the drawable for each question. I want to have separate images. So let me get rid of this and instead import all of the images that I have prepared for this. So you can just drag those drawables in here from my other project, and you see here we have all of the flags. So this is Kuwait, I assume. This is the German flag, Fiji, and so forth. Now we have all of those beautiful flags. Now let's go back to our questions and use those. So here, what country does this belong to? And I'm going to start with this beautiful country of Argentina, or the flag of Argentina. And then I need to add the options. Okay, so I have the drawable for Argentina, and now I can go ahead and enter option 1. So let's say here we just have to come up with some possible answers. So I'm going to say this is Argentina. Then I'm going to say this is Australia as the second option. And this is Leah, like so. And this, of course, has to be outside of a given string. So this is option 1, option 2. Now let's add option 3, and therefore we need to add a comma. And option 3 would be Armenia. And then finally Austria. So now what is going to be the right answer, which is the final property? And I'm going to use the correct answer being 1. So it's option 1. So now accordingly, we need to add this to our questions list. So now we have the first question, and now we can go ahead and add the Q1, so the question 1, to our questions list. And of course, we need to return something. So you see this func get question needs to return an array list of questions, which this questions list, by the way, is. So we can just go ahead and return this questions list. And now our code doesn't complain anymore. It's quite happy because we are following the procedure and following the architecture that our project wants. So now you can just go ahead and add additional questions. I'm just going to copy and paste them in here because I've just prepared 9 questions here. Let me add them. You can, as I said, really be creative here and use very different images, very different questions and image options here. So here the flag of Kuwait doesn't seem to be part of my options. I think I need to use New Zealand then. Let's use New Zealand here then. Okay, so now I have my 9 different questions. Beautiful, with the individual items, with the different options. Here's one even none of these. And yeah, you can just play around with it and add whatever questions you can come up with. Add as many as you want and so forth. So now how can we actually test this? So how I'm going to test this is by using the logcat. And we've not used the logcat yet, but that's what this course is for, constantly new things. So let's learn how to use this new thing. And therefore, let's go over to our questions activity, because once we get to this questions activity, I want to load the questions list. Okay, like so. And I'm going to get that from my constants dot get questions. So this is method that we just prepared, right? Or this function. And what it does is it returns a bunch of questions for us, which is amazing. And now, in order to keep it simple, I'm just going to log this saying the question size or questions list size is, and then I'm going to display the amount of questions that we have here. So $questions list dot size. So now import the log here in order for this to work. So Android util log will allow me to use this, a log entry. So in order to see what is displayed in the log, you need to open up the logcat. So there's this logcat here at the bottom. And now let's run our application and actually search for questions list, like so. Questions list, like I entered it there. And maybe I should be super precise here. So questions list. Okay, and you see there's nothing there. And that is because we never actually executed this code. So it will only be displayed in the logcat once this line of code is executed. And how can we execute it? Well, by calling the onCreate method. How do we call the onCreate method of the questions activity? Well, by opening up this activity. And how do we get there? Well, a bunch of stupid questions, Dennis, come on. Well, it's by calling this intent here in our main activity. So here, this beautiful main activity, and that is once we enter a name and we click on the button start. All right, let's do all of that stuff. So let's enter Dennis and click on start, and we are on this next activity, which is empty. But now let's look at the logcat, and you see the questions list size is 9. So that worked. And now we know that we can move to another activity and we get the questions at least over to this other activity. So that's super powerful. In the next video, we're going to set up the questions UI and we're going to connect the UI to our model So we have created this model, which is this question here, by the way, if you were wondering what it is. The data class is the model of a question, and we can now connect it to our UI. So see you in the next video.